After World War I ended in 1914, it was called the War to End All Wars because it was so devastating that countless countries around the world wanted to stop anything like it from happening ever again. Of course, just 35 years later, World War II broke out, killing even more people than the first. It's been over 70 years now since that war ended. In that time, many people have speculated if another global war will happen again. Sometimes it has seemed worryingly close to becoming a reality. My name is Danny Burke, and will there be a World War III? Despite an improvement in relations, there is still an ideological divide in the world. The United States and her allies stand on one side, facing off against the likes of China and Russia. Of course, this has not always been a direct military affair. These nations and their allies have clashed economically, with spies, or even through smaller proxy wars in other countries, most notably Korea, Vietnam, and the Indochina Wars. But since the end of World War II, these countries have never clashed outright, never fought a major war. Why is this? Well, many people attribute this to nuclear weapons. These devastating tools of war, developed at the end of the last World War, can level cities and kill hundreds of thousands of people in an instant. Now you might think the most powerful weapons of war would encourage more war, but paradoxically, they seem to have prevented them. There are an estimated 15,000 nuclear weapons on the planet, all owned by 9 countries: China, India, Israel, France, the UK, North Korea, Pakistan, Russia, and the United States. Those last 2 countries are thought to possess 93% of them, far outweighing the other countries combined. The fact that the US and Russia have so many has actually stopped either one from ever hitting the big red button and launching a first strike, no matter how bad the political tensions have got over the years. They, and everyone else, knows that this would be a death wish. As soon as one nation sees incoming nuclear missiles, they would then fire their own, killing millions on either side. This is called mutually assured destruction, and despite its morbid undertone, it's done quite a good job of preventing a nuclear war from ever happening. But that doesn't mean it will always be this way. Recent events have got people talking about the possibility of World War III in a very real way. There are 3 main sparks on Earth right now that could engulf the world in the flames of another world war. The first is a European-Russian front. When the Soviet Union fell in 1991, a swathe of Eastern European countries gained independence from the new Russian state. But some experts said they still fell well within the Russian sphere of influence, and that their government still fear the Kremlin watching their every move. These fears came to the surface in 2008 when Russian forces occupied parts of Georgia. Then in 2014, Russia annexed Crimea from the Ukraine. This caused international outrage from world leaders and led to a number of sanctions against Russia. Pro-Russian supporters have argued the legality of these cases and said that the expansion of NATO has threatened Russia in recent decades. When sanctions, words, and legal arguments are all exhausted, some worry that war may be the next course of action from both sides. Then there is the Middle East. It may not come as a surprise that one of the most war-torn areas in recent memory may be the catalyst for another world war. The wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria have left the area divided, with millions of people displaced and hundreds of thousands dead. People are divided among ethnic and religious lines in the form of Shia and Sunni Muslims. Evidence has come to light in recent years of nations such as Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and others funding Sunni insurgent groups in an attempt to overthrow the Assad regime in Syria, while Russia and Iran are trying to support him. This funding and arming of insurgent groups is something Western countries have been doing for years. Many countries are heavily invested in the area, and experts fear that putting troops on the ground could be a clash that spills out globally. Finally, there is Asia. China and the US have been huge trading partners with one another, but behind closed doors, a war of words has been brewing. Japan, backed by the US, has had a worsening relationship with China. There have also been repeated standoffs in the South China Sea as China tries to increase its military influence by bulking its navy in the area, with a number of smaller Asian countries feeling threatened. Then, of course, there is the Chinese-backed North Korea. Although North Korea has been shut out from global politics, it still has a somewhat reluctant friend in the form of China. In recent years, North Korea's threats to bomb and invade South Korea, Japan, and even the US have people fearing that if they do carry out these threats and countries retaliate, they will have China to answer to. A China that is arguably economically stronger than the US already, and its military grows stronger by the day. It's a sad truth that since the end of World War II, World War III has always been a possibility. Global politics is a messy and often unpredictable affair. Sometimes wars that look certain fizzle out into decades of peace, and other times war consumes nations who never saw it coming. The prospect of mutually assured destruction still gives some people hope that a nuclear war between major powers will stay at bay, as it has done for over 70 years. Let us hope that this stays true and the world does not descend into madness for a third time, because, as Albert Einstein once famously said, "I do not know with what weapons World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones."
Amid rising tensions between North Korea and the United States, whispers of World War III are being heard. But what if, somehow, someway, North Korea won World War III? Welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions. I'm Charlotte Dobre. Though it is believed that North Korea's missiles cannot reach the USA, they have made it perfectly clear that they would love to strike the USA, if they could. The North Korean YouTube channel has released a video that depicts a nuclear strike on Washington. Using computer animation, the video titled Last Chance shows a ballistic missile flying through Earth's atmosphere and slamming into the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. The video states, "The United States must choose. It is up to you whether the nation called the United States exists on this planet or not." North Korea has 1 million men in its military, and another 13 million available. 1 million soldiers is not something to laugh at. They are ranked 23 out of 126 countries on globalfirepower.com. North Korea hopes that they will make the war so devastating to the US and South Korea that both those countries would just give up. The war would begin with the North Korean military firing thousands of rocket launchers and ballistic missiles at the South Korean capital of Seoul, which is just 20 miles south of North Korea and home to 13 million people. If North Korea feels threatened enough, they might even employ the use of nuclear weapons. Wars never go according to plan. To rule out the possibility of a North Korea win is foolish. One must remember, North Korea would not fight its fight alone. In the scenario where North Korea would win World War III, we would have to assume that becomes possible if North Korea's allies all ganged up on the United States. North Korea would be leading the charge, but it would be backed by its allies. Both China and Russia are allies of North Korea, and both have a large military arsenal. If North Korea won World War III, the entire Korean peninsula would belong to them. Korea would also probably be a free market authoritarian state like China or Vietnam, and it's likely that a large number of South Koreans would be killed or imprisoned. Nobody truly knows that much about North Korea. A satellite photo of the Korean peninsula shows the gap between the lights of economically advanced South Korea and the blackness that is North Korea. It is likely that the country would become more technologically advanced as well if they won the war and became less isolationist. In this situation, North Korea would win the war, but it would not become the most powerful country. China probably would. China is currently the second most powerful country in the world, and it also has far more people, 1.35 billion to be exact, and 2.3 million soldiers. China devastated the US in the Korean War, and it can do it again. Just because a country like the United States has the best military in the world, that doesn't mean that war strategy is irrelevant. Even with superior technology, training, experience, and funding, the US were still unable to defeat China in the Korean War. What the Chinese lack in those things, it makes up for in strategy. It is believed that China will surpass the US and become the most powerful country in the world at some point. Perhaps that time will come after World War III erupts. If China became the world's most powerful country, the sphere of influence would come from that part of the world. Therefore, North Korea would likely not be as isolationist as it is today. Perhaps the sphere of influence would result in the spread of socialism, but the Chinese are very interested in economic success. China's economy is growing at a rate of 9% per year. It is unfathomable that a country could be industrializing that quickly. But China does have a problem. Its population does not match its gross domestic product. Its people do not have the resources to adequately care for themselves. Because of this, China began exporting its people. China has developed its presence in many places across the world, like in Africa. More than 750,000 Chinese have moved to countries in Africa over the last decade. Some experts believe that China may increase its presence in Africa by hundreds of millions to tap into its resources. It's estimated that around 70% of African timber ends up in Chinese ports. China also has footholds in Latin America. It's now Brazil's #1 trading partner. One is to assume that if China became the world's foremost superpower, its people would be exported to most places on Earth. Chinese might rival English as a language and even overtake it completely. It is difficult to imagine what would happen in a situation where Asian powers became the dominant force in the world. A lot needs to happen before that can become an even remote possibility. What do you think would happen if North Korea won World War III?
Hello and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions, the channel that looks to answer exactly those. Today we are delving further into our World War III series, asking which countries would be the safest if World War III broke out. If the state of the world and current political tensions are anything to go by, countries involved in the war would be America, North Korea, China, Russia and Syria, along with assorted allies South Korea, Japan, Canada, Great Britain, the Ukraine, France, Iran, some parts of South America, other parts of Europe, and possible large chunks of the Middle East, as well as possibly India and Pakistan. I'd steer clear of those places, but if you happen to reside there, the safest areas will be out of the cities. If I still lived in the UK, for example, I would would consider starting a new life in the Scottish Highlands, although that may still not protect you if a nuclear bomb was dropped on Glasgow. In previous wars, Sweden was a safe and beautiful place to be. They haven't been involved in any fighting in 200 years. However, in recent years, Russia has been threatening the idyllic Scandinavian country, with Swedish officials suggesting Russian espionage was at an all-time high. This has led Sweden to seriously think about joining NATO. Swedish neighbours Norway are currently in NATO, so they could be dragged into the conflict. Although in terms of the terrain, the Norwegian mountains would be a good place to avoid war, but maybe not to avoid the harsh ravages of the elements. If Norway and Sweden were to take part in a war, their neighbour Denmark may too be obliged to join, ruling out Scandinavia as a safe haven. Perth of Western Australia is also one of the most remote cities in the world, meaning in theory it would be pretty far away from the action and unaffected from nuclear fallout. Australia itself is a non-nuclear nation, so wouldn't necessarily be a target. However, the country have made it clear they're in support of Western interest. While you would be reasonably safe in Perth, there is a chance the city could become a target in retaliation attacks. While Australia and Scandinavia wouldn't be first hit priority, they do still have some political risks. So let's have a look at currently politically neutral countries and whether they're a safe place to be. Switzerland, home of Lindt chocolate and sweeping landscapes. The country is not only a tax haven, but a haven for the apolitical. In previous wars, Switzerland has thrived despite sharing borders with Germany and France. The Alps provide protection enough from land attacks. However, if a nuke was to be dropped on either neighbour, there is a good chance nuclear fallout would be spread, even over the mountains. Ireland is another politically neutral nation, although very close to non-neutral Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom, making it vulnerable to nuclear fallout. The safest places in Ireland, if any, is beyond Killarney in the west. Next we have Iceland. Neutral Iceland would be a good bet during World War III. It's out of the way enough not to have to worry about nuclear fallout, and as they're a non-nuclear apolitical nation, it wouldn't be a target. The terrain is very beautiful, and you can enjoy geothermic hot springs with your safety. Islands like Fiji and Tuvalu are excellent choices for safety, far away from any fighting, and reasonably self-sufficient in terms of produce. The country of Bhutan would also be reasonably safe. Despite being in Asia, the Himalayas offer good shelter. The southern tip of South America would also be a great place to survive World War III. Southern parts of Argentina and Chile, like Patagonia, would be out of the way of the nuclearly polluted northern hemisphere. My choice would be New Zealand. Regularly appearing on the Global Peace Index, New Zealand is a prosperous country with a good degree of self-sufficiency and a strong civilization. Clean air, fertile soil, mild livable seasons, and government stability, as well as the fact that it is really far from anywhere. I mean, if it's good enough for Frodo, it's good enough for me. So, which countries would be safest in World War III? Iceland, Pacific Islands, the southern tip of regions of South American countries? They would probably be your best bet. Pack your walking boots, and I will see you there. Space, the final frontier, or the battleground for World War III. You decide. Hello and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions. I'm Rebecca Felgate, and today we are asking whether or not World War III will be fought in space. While the question kind of seems somewhat preposterous and perhaps even whimsical, the United States have so far reportedly spent $5 billion on space warfare, and the Chinese military are also carrying out space tests. In 2013, they launched a rocket that reached 6,250 miles into space, nowhere near as far as the moon, but still. China also have plans to build a bigger space station by the year 2022. They already have 2 small ones. Also, Russia is planning to launch their own station by 2024, breaking away from the International Space Station it shares with the USA, Europe, Canada, and Japan in favor of joining the new Chinese venture and starting one of their own. Perhaps these superpowers are gearing up for a space war. Space has actually already been used as a pawn in the chess game of war. During the Cold War, there was the infamous space race between the United States and the USSR that resulted in America being the first country to put a man on the moon. Of course, the Soviet Union followed that up by probing Venus in the 70s and 80s. So say the forthcoming space stations are eventually used as a part of a war game plan. How exactly will that work? Well, according to news articles on CNN and Newsweek, US astronomers are exploring the mounting of a laser on a new telescope for the International Space Station. Yes, you did hear me correctly, a laser. It's all very Dr. Evil? I don't know. The laser is supposed to be used to stop space junk entering our atmosphere, but it could very well be used in warfare to aim at other space stations or indeed targets on planet Earth. Maybe we'll invent our own Death Star one day. Who knows? Space lasers are one thing, but our current sophisticated land weapons would kind of struggle in space. Rockets, drones, and missiles these days use GPS, which wouldn't work for anything happening above the satellites. Although this does bring in a pretty interesting and feasible way World War III could come to space. In reality, shooting down satellites from space would be a good way to get an upper hand on the enemy. There are around 1,100 active satellites in space. In reality, one could go to space in World War III to shoot down the satellite, many of which are used for military GPS coordinates. Without these, missiles would not meet their correct targets. Similarly, satellites would play a part in World War espionage. These kinds of satellites are called reconnaissance satellites and are used under code names to collect enemy data. Another way in which space may be used in war, although I don't know about World War III, is by incoming attack from other beings we don't yet know about in the universe. Although, if it ever happens, it wouldn't be considered a world war, more of an intergalactic war. With all of the damage and loss of life that could be caused by World War III if it were to be fought on land, perhaps it would be better to go blast one another in space, although I still don't think that sounds too productive. Maybe it will grab the attention of possible other life forms far away though. Who knows? Ultimately, if World War III were to happen anytime soon, no, it wouldn't be fought in space. However, many tactical maneuvers will involve space and may include missiles that briefly exit the Earth's atmosphere. But again, the main targets are likely to be on land. If World War III happens in, say, 20 years' time, I'm being serious, maybe space lasers will be a problem. It all just depends at what time war breaks out and how far countries like China have got with their space programs. I, for one, really hope that it never happens and that everyone can keep their cool. Space should be a place for exploring and learning, not for war and destruction. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's episode of Life's Biggest Questions. Do you guys think that we will see a space war anytime soon? Let me know in the comments section down below. The world is a reasonably tense place right now, with countries big and small keen to show their strength. One of the strongest countries out there right now appears to be Russia. So, what if conflict broke out with them, and what if they won? Hello and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions. I'm Rebecca Felgate, and today we are continuing our World War series as we ask, what if Russia won World War III? I can only imagine from a historical standpoint, we are in a very interesting time right now. Politically and economically, there is a lot going on. 3 countries appear to be vying for ultimate superpower status: the United States, China, and Russia. 2 of these countries hold the lion's share of the world's nuclear power. Guess which 2? That's right, the States and Russia both own thousands of nuclear warheads, and both countries have made snide comments that they could both destroy one another within minutes. Indeed, when the 2 nations last very nearly came to blows in the Cold War, both had plans for mutually assured destruction. So really, the question isn't so much about what if Russia won, but what would it take to win, and how much would really be left of either country if World War III involved nuclear weapons. Let's say whatever transpires transpires, and somehow Russia ends victorious. It would be a tainted victory, as the death and destruction would be widespread, far worse than in World War II, which claimed 75 million lives. Although in a very sick way, the world will finally know what devastation nuclear war would cause, a question with such a scary answer that is dictated a slightly grudging peacetime for over 70 years now. Firstly, if Russia won a world war, regions around the already sprawling landmass may be in danger of annexing. Crimea has already been swallowed, and things probably would not be looking so good for the Ukraine. It is hard to predict what the exact impact of a Russian win would have within Europe, but there would certainly be a shift of mood with the added power. The European Union would likely feel a lot of pressure and tension, and may be worried how an all-powerful Russia may affect their politics. On top of that, it is likely that many European countries will have been drawn into the war on America's side, for instance their strong ally the United Kingdom. If any bombs fell on European soil, they may be feeling pretty injured and insulted, calling for decades of tension in Europe yet again. So what would happen to the United States? It's extremely unlikely that there would ever be any kind of Russian social invasion. I would highly doubt that Russia would want United States land, as it's huge and very far away from their own. It is possible that some Russian troops would occupy areas of American soil, however this is unlikely, as I would imagine the absence of any Russian military in the States would be a very key point for surrender. Each time Germany has lost a war, the country has undergone a lot of political upheaval, and this would likely be the same for the United States, which would find itself broken and divided. The country would need the right kind of leader to bring them together once again. If not, there is a risk that the states could seek individual independence. For example, there have been whispers that the state of California would like to be its own nation. While these ideas seem far-fetched now in peacetime, after a harsh war, anything is possible. One thing seems for sure: if America did lose the war, going from what we know from similar situations in history, it is likely that they would lose all of their overseas land. This would include Guam, the Virgin Islands, and the Northern Mariana Islands. This would further decrease the United States' global strength. A few more burning questions. If Russia won World War III, what role would China have had to play, and what would be going on in North Korea, a country vocal about its dislike for the USA? Who knows what would happen with the Hermit Nation, but things would certainly be interesting between China and Russia, two powerful countries that share a border. As with World War II, World War III would be awful whoever won or lost. Each time nations come to blows, it sets the stage for the next conflict. If we erupt into World War III, it will have already laid the foundations for World War IV, and who is to say how long we would keep biting chunks off one another until we decide that we need a more reasonable solution.
A war fought with artificial intelligence, science fiction, or an impending reality. Technology is improving at an alarming rate, and as technology improves, it will be used in practice in ways that were not previously possible, most notably in warfare. Elon Musk, CEO of Tesla Motors and SpaceX, warned that an artificial intelligence race is more likely to cause World War III than a 20th century-style arms race, or even North Korea. Naturally, the United States has the upper hand when it comes to military force, but Russian President Vladimir Putin suggested recently that AI may be the way that Russia could rebalance the power shift created by the US outspending Russia on defense each year. Could other countries follow in Russia's footsteps? Today, Life's Biggest Questions asks, will World War III be fought with artificial intelligence? Hello and welcome back to LBQ. I'm Charlotte Dobre. Don't forget to like and subscribe and let us know in those comments below what topics you would like to see next. There are many reasons why world governments would want to employ the use of artificial intelligence in warfare. Employing the use of cyber weapons ensures avoiding the use of nuclear weapons. Yes, many countries have stockpiles of nuclear weapons, but using those nuclear weapons is dangerous and could set off a chain of events that may lead to the destruction of humanity. Another alternative? Get technology to fight your battles for you. Drones, self-driving vehicles, cybersecurity, robot soldiers. Using AI has many advantages. AIs don't have empathy like humans, so they don't hesitate. They make the decision to attack almost instantly, before a human even has a reason to. They can detect an enemy and fire so quickly they could replace the need for man-to-man combat. AI-controlled aircraft will completely change the game. An aircraft being able to function depends on the pilot surviving. If an aircraft doesn't need a pilot, that would take away the need for training. The aircraft would be lighter and therefore faster. An aircraft wouldn't need to provide things like oxygen to a pilot who needs it at high altitudes. AI could save world governments millions and prevent the loss of millions of active soldiers. At the same time, there are over 30 countries that are developing armed drones, which are getting more and more advanced with each successive generation. Up until now, these drones have been controlled by humans, but that could very well change in the near future. We already have self-driving cars and planes, why not military weapons? All of this being said, according to many experts, there are reasons why AI weapons could be very dangerous. Which experts? Pretty much the best and brightest the world has to offer. Stephen Hawking joined Elon Musk, Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak, and 1,000 other colleagues to call for a ban on offensive autonomous weapons. They know the dangers of AI, as I'm sure you probably do too. We've seen the dangers in films and shows like The Terminator, Westworld, Black Mirror, and iRobot. It is entirely possible that artificially intelligent machines and robots could learn to not take orders from humans and instead turned against us. Imagine what would happen if every killer robot on Earth suddenly decided that they weren't going to fight our wars for us, so they decided to wipe out the human race instead. There isn't only the danger of AI robots turning against humans. In the words of Stephen Hawking, AI will bring new dangers like powerful autonomous weapons or new ways for the few to oppress the many. Not having empathy means AI robots wouldn't be able to hold back if they decide that a preemptive strike is the most probable path to victory. At this time, over 60 non-government organizations have called for a treaty that bans autonomous weapons, but many countries are still not willing to take cyber weapons off the table, and reasonably so. Cyber weapons could save countless lives and countless dollars, but killer AI robots could potentially be very dangerous. Obviously, it's difficult to imagine what a war with AI killer robots will be like. It's never happened before, but AI is becoming more and more a part of our day-to-day life without us even realizing it. Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft are all using it in their new technologies. So will World War III be fought with AI? I would say that's a yes, whether we like it or not. Russia is regarding AI development as an arms race. China and the United States are following. If these countries are developing AI weapons, other countries will be forced to follow as well. And it's safe to say that the country who is ahead of the game in the AI department will be the country who has the advantage.